Hey, happy Monday. This is our final session of things with surface area and volume before you get to actually be that designer who gets to come up with the design that you think is going to be best for your client. So let's make sure that we are feeling like we can solidify our concept around general surface area work and general volume work, because both of those are going to be useful tomorrow as you are proposing the building that you think your client should end up purchasing. So we've got two different buildings that we're looking at today. We're considering a building that is a rectangular prism, and we're going to consider a building that is a triangular prism. So let's start with the rectangular prism. We talked already about how you would find the surface area that's going to be covered in glass. That's those walls that would go around. Glass is super expensive, so we definitely do care about how much glass the client's going to have to buy. But there are other building concerns that you need to consider as well. The floor and the roof of your building are also going to be things that you're going to have to purchase some materials for. Maybe it's cement, maybe it's concrete, maybe it's, I heard, cinder blocks, bricks, soil for the garden, all of those different things. You're going to have to purchase that as well if you're the client who's making this building. So there are reasons on the cost perspective why you might need to consider all of the surface area stuff. So if we're looking at that, we are not just concerned about the walls anymore. We're concerned about everything. So some strategies that people threw out here. If we're trying to find surface area, we might be involved. Do you want to come be in the video? Like, is that what's happening right now? Okay, so what are some strategies for thinking about surface area?
Using all the sides around, the glass faces.
Is it just the faces that are going to be covered in
glass?
glass?
In the bases.
Okay, so we need to focus on all of our faces. Especially with a rectangular prism, if you know the base, if you know the roof, you know the base. If you know the front, you know the back. If you know the side, you know the side. So you're going to have opposite sides, opposite faces are going to be the same. And people knew that they were going to need to add the areas together. So those are some things to consider here. The major component that we added in was thinking about organization. Okay. How do you make sure that you have, bye guys, have a good night. How do you make sure that you have all of your bases and all of your faces covered, literally? So for this one, we would think about three different sets of things. We've got our roof and our floor. So we could say TB for top, bottom, or roof, floor, RF. We've got our two sides. So maybe SW for side walls. And we have our front and our back. So maybe we could say FB for front and the back. Malcolm in 7B said that it would be helpful to also translate your lengths over so that you have all of your measurements marked. So if you know that the height is 20 units, it's going to be 20 units all around. If you know it's going to be 11 here, you know it's 11 all around. And if you know it's 7 back, you know it's going to be 7 all around. So we've got all of our measurements in that you could use to come up with the areas of these different rectangles. And conveniently, we can also see all of our rectangles because the opposite faces are the ones that are missing. But we can see the front, we can see the top, and we can see one of the sides. So if I wanted to get the top and the bottom, I would need to get the area of that rectangle. Say 7 times 11, which is 77. And then we have top and bottom, so we need to do times 2 of those. And that's going to give us 154 square units. For our side walls, we're going to be going 7 by 20 up, or 140. And then we're going to have 2 of those walls, both sides. So we're going to have 280 square units. And then our front, we would have an 11 by 20 rectangle, which should be 220. And then we're going to have 2 of those because we also have the back. So we would end up with 440 square units. And then, as people were saying, we needed to add up the areas. So to get the total, you would add those up. 154, this is where I'm going to, for accuracy and speed, use my calculator. Oh, but I don't have to. Let's not. 440 plus 280, that would be 640, 720, 720, 820, 874. And I can confirm that. If I go 154 plus 280 plus 440, we've got 874 square units. And that's the total amount of material that I would need to purchase to cover these walls. So that doesn't actually change a lot if we go to a triangular prism. What does change is how many faces there are and which faces are going to be the same as each other. So we don't have necessarily opposite faces all around. Only our two triangular bases are going to be opposite. So those are the only things that are going to be the same. So in this one, we've got our roof, which is that right triangle. And then we have a triangle, the same triangle along the bottom, and our building is 20 high. So it's 20, 12 units, 9 units, and 15 units. Okay, so we know we need to get all of the faces. Looking at this, I have my two bases, and then I have the front and the back walls. So I have five walls or 5 faces altogether. I know that my opposite faces are the same, so that's going to be my 2 bases are going to be the same area. And I know I'm going to need to find and add the areas of these. So let's name them. Let's call these our triangle bases. And then we could name our other walls based on their measurements. Since we have a triangle with 3 different sides, that means we're going to have 3 different walls. So our first one could be a 15 by 20 wall. Our next one could be a 9 by 20 wall. And our last could be a 12 by 20 wall. And that's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, all of the faces of my triangular prism. So for this triangle base, I need to think about which of these dimensions is going to be important for finding the area. Since I would want to ideally make a rectangle here, I need to pay attention to where the right angle is, because that would be the 2 sides of my rectangle. Where the right angle is, I've got 9 by 12, so that tells me that I need to do 9 times 12 divided by 2. So for one rectangle, it's going to be 9 times 12 divided by 2. But I have 2 of them, so I can multiply that by 2. If I'm doing divided by 2, multiply by 2, that just cancels out. I can just say 9 times 12 is going to be 108 square units. For my 15 by 20 wall, that's already in some ways self-evident because it's going to be 15 by 20, 15 times 20. So I have 300 square units. My 9 by 20 is going to be 180 square units if I multiply, and my 12 by 20 would be 240 square units. I would need to then add all 4 of those together. Remember, it's only 4 things I'm adding because this covers both of my triangles. So if I do 300 plus 180, I have 480. 480 plus 200 would be 680. 680 plus 40 would be 720. 820, 828 units squared. And I know that I've got all my 5 walls because I organized myself clearly. The general strategies did not change, though. I needed to pay attention to all of my faces. If I had opposite faces, I knew they were going to be the same, which makes my life a little bit easier. And then I need to add up all of my areas at the end to get my total. So that tells us about things like costs. Volume, on the other hand, tells our clients about opportunities. How much space do they have for things like offices, storage? Could also have an impact on costs if you were talking about needing to air condition or heat a space. If it's a bigger volume, it might cost more to air condition it, to heat it. But overall, more space is going to be good given that you only have a certain footprint. You want to make the most of that footprint. So if we've got our rectangular prism, and I'm going to put that side by side with our triangular prism. Turns out, just like with the surface area, there are similar strategies that you can apply here. And that requires thinking really about what volume means. So if I'm talking about volume, I'm thinking about the space inside. I'm thinking about cubes. How many cubes could you put into a stack inside of an object? And that means I'm thinking about stacking and I'm thinking about layers. If I'm talking about stacking and layering, then I would want to say, if this is my floor, how many times am I going to have to stack it? How many times am I going to have to layer that base in order to get my entire building? So, for my rectangular prism, My base is going to be that garden that has a 77 square unit area. My base area is going to be 77 units squared. I'm going to have to take that would be 77 cubes that could be on that, and I'm going to have to do that 20 times. So I could say 77 times 20. 20 meaning that's going to be my layers. If I do 77 times 20, let's see, 70 times 20 would be 1,400. 7 times 20 is 140. 1,540, I think. Yep, 1,540 cubes, or units cubed, that would fit into that space. So I took my base area and I multiplied it by the height. Here, my base is a triangle, not a rectangle, but it's still going to be that same concept of taking that and layering it 20 times. We already knew that our base area was 54 from the surface area work, and I'm going to have 20 layers. So that's going to be 1,080, I believe, because 54 times 2 would be 108. Yep. 1,080 cubic units. And if I were a client looking at this, this one seems to give me a lot more space, almost 50% more than this one would. So I might be saying, hey, this rectangular prism looks like a good building for me to use from a space perspective. You would also need to think about the surface area. You would also need to think about things like, is it attractive? Is it aesthetic? So generally, with surface area, you're adding together all of the sides that are going to need to be covered. With volume, you're going to think about your base area, and you're going to multiply that by your height. And in a prism, anything that are your opposite parallel sides, so it's a triangle here, it's a rectangle here. If it was a cylinder, it would be the circle. Whatever it is that's opposite, that's going to be your base, and you need to find that base area and multiply it by the height to get the volume. I'm really looking forward to seeing what designs you guys come up with tomorrow. Have a good night.